Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And the European Commission just gave their latest update on the Xbox Activision Blizzard acquisition. This is one of those big regulators looking into the buyout, and they have now officially confirmed that they are heading into phase 2 of their investigation, and they've listed their concerns as to why. Now, to be very clear, because I know there's always a lot of questions regarding this topic, this news was completely 100% to be expected. This is not an indictment that this acquisition is facing any kind of trouble per se, but rather this follows suit with most regulators up to this point. The FTC, the CMA, and others, they are all kind of going into that second phase of the investigation. Now, with that said, what does their listed concerns actually mean, and what should we expect next? And that's what we're going to cover today. Also, Nintendo, they made waves yet again for their continued success with the Switch and its library, but they did actually have to pull back just a little bit. The Switch does appear to be slowing down just ever so slightly after all. Before we get started though, if you're new to the channel and if you like this type of content, definitely hit those buttons below, like, subscribe, and do ring that bell. With that said, though, let's just go and jump right into things, starting off with, unfortunately, a franchise cancellation. This is for Project Cars, as EA has decided to end the series as is, which is ironically actually a very messed up situation. See, this is a Slightly Mad Studios game, and the thing about this studio is that they were also behind Need for Speed Shift, yet another simulation experience under EA. However, EA did away with that series years ago, hence Project Cars was then born. But sadly, Slightly Mad still couldn't get away from EA because they acquired Codemasters back in 2019, which included, yes, Slightly Mad Studios. So now here we are in 2022, and EA has halted all work on their second car simulation series. Again, it's an ironically messed up situation, and I do feel really bad for the developers in this case. Project Cars, though, for the most part, has been a pretty good car simulation series. I know the third entry wasn't as well received, and some people thought that was a little bit more arcadey, but I'd say for the most part, this series has kind of filled a void in the game industry. There's really only a few car simulation games that are of this caliber. You have Forza Motorsports, and then you have Gran Turismo, but with both of those games, they are exclusive to Xbox and PlayStation. Project Cars, though, this kind of acted as that multi-platform series and was also available on PC. Now, to be fair, Microsoft has expanded to PC and Steam, so the next Forza Motorsports game will likely be on Steam as well, so that does lessen the blow here. But as for Slightly Mad Studios, EA did say that they'll put them on other EA Sports and racing games. Let me know, though, if you did like the series and if you're going to miss it going forward. Next up here, we're getting another game-to-film adaptation as Netflix posted this up on Twitter. Gears of War was released 16 years ago today, and to mark the occasion, Netflix has partnered up with the Coalition to adapt the Gears of War video game saga into a live-action feature film, followed by an adult animated series, with the potential for more stories to follow. Now, these Netflix adaptations can be admittedly very hit or miss. Sometimes they turn out to be great, like with Cyberpunk Edgerunners, which in large part actually helped revive 2077. And then you also have the Castlevania series, which was really good as well. Then on the opposite side, you have others like Resident Evil and Dragon's Dogma, and both of those were questionable, to say the least. But I will say Gears of War is a really interesting choice here. Now, this is actually one of my all-time favorite series, so maybe I'm a little biased in this case, but Gears has such a fascinating world that can tell a lot of different stories. When thinking about Gears, I'm always taken back to the original Mad World trailer for that first game. Legitimately one of the best ads I've ever seen for really anything ever, but the reason I bring that ad up specifically is because of how immediately it connects with you, and you just want to know what happens in that world. So I think that that's a true testament to not only how beautiful that ad was and still is today, but also because I think it kind of shows you, if done right, there is a draw to this world and its characters trying to survive on this planet. Gears of War has always been a story of survival, and I think there's a lot of things that you can do with that and all of the terror that comes from monsters rising up from the ground below you. Xbox, though, I mean, they've tried to do a film adaptation for this series for years and years, and nothing to show for their efforts. But now with Netflix, it looks like it's finally happening, and with the coalition involved here, I think that that's a good sign for fans. Now, I don't know about the live action film, as those don't always really shape up all that well, but I am really curious in the animated series specifically, as we have seen Netflix have success with those. But let me know what you all think about all this. Are you excited for Gears of War on Netflix or not? Speaking of Xbox, though, let's just go and dive right into the Activision Blizzard acquisition once again, though. The European Commission, as expected, did announce that they are moving into the second phase of their investigation, where they'll take a look on whether or not this buyout could pose a bigger problem. Now, the first thing that everybody needs to kind of understand here is that this is not a bad thing, and it's not an indication on whether or not this deal will pass. It is always important to keep in mind that this is a nearly $70 billion acquisition, and it's not every day that an acquisition of this size just makes their way to regulators' desk. They see that number and they think, whoa, what's happening here? And that only amplifies when they realize that it's coming from Microsoft, out of all companies, one of the biggest companies in the entire world. So they absolutely want to do their due diligence, as they very much should. Now, again, though, this is completely 100% to be expected. But they did list their concerns and what they plan on taking a closer look at, and when I looked through what they had to say, it actually was not all that bad. Now, their primary focal points seem to boil down to pretty much three key areas, being the potential to significantly reduce competition for the console and PC distribution market, then subscriptions and cloud-based services, and lastly, which was a little bit of a surprise here, competition for PC operating systems. Yeah, that one's a little bit of a strange one there, but we're going to dive into each one of these individually, but I do look at this and I think, yeah, this isn't really all that bad for Microsoft. Thanks to the Brazilian documents that was made public, we've already seen how Microsoft has handled these questions over there. And these concerns, they don't really seem all that much different outside of the operating systems anyways. Again, that one's a little bit of a strange one. This isn't another CMA situation, though, where they actually just seem more concerned with Sony's market lead than anything else. But the one thing that continuously pops up in these investigations is what's happening with Call of Duty. And again, that very much is the case here, as well as they did say this. In particular, the Commission is concerned that by acquiring Activision Blizzard, Microsoft may foreclose access to Activision Blizzard's console and PC video games, especially to high-profile and highly successful games, so-called AAA games, such as Call of Duty. So unsurprisingly, Call of Duty still remains the primary concern, as it is specifically named here. Now, it is interesting, though, that they did mention other AAA games as well, but they didn't really name any specific names either, but that could still be worth paying attention to going forward. So far, Microsoft hasn't named any other games outside of Call of Duty and quote-unquote popular franchises, for whatever that means. But that is the thing here. Microsoft has time and time again committed to Call of Duty remaining multi-platform, and they've been very adamant that they want Call of Duty on more platforms and not less. They've even compared Call of Duty to Minecraft. What we do know, though, is that thanks to Sony's public complaints, Call of Duty operates on a contract, and technically, after that contract ends, Microsoft could then make it exclusive to Xbox. Now, I assume that Minecraft is similar as well. I'm sure that probably operates on some type of contract, but that appears to be the big concern for these regulators, and obviously Sony as well. Now, I still do believe that Sony's being a little disingenuous, but this is a major part of the second phase of this investigation. If these regulators really do find this to be an issue, we could be heading down a path of concessions. Microsoft might have to put it in writing that they will keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. And if they do that, then they'll just kind of get the ball rolling from there. Now, I don't think Microsoft will have a problem with that because they've already publicly committed to it. But if they can get through regulations without any concessions, that of course would still be ideal for them. This entire Call of Duty exclusivity concern, though, I think has zero merit on actually stopping this buyout. I think that this acquisition has always been more about Xbox Game Pass than it is about exclusivity. So Microsoft will likely play ball and make sure that these regulators know that it will remain multi-platform, whether that be in writing or not. Now, as for subscriptions, the EU said, when it comes to multi-game subscription services and/or cloud game streaming services in particular, the Commission is concerned that by acquiring Activision Blizzard, Microsoft may foreclose access to the detriment of its rival distributors of console and PC video games that offer such services to its own PC and console video games, which are key for the provision of the nascent services of multi-game subscription and cloud game streaming. Now, this here is the part of the investigation that I think is a little bit more interesting, just because they are looking at subscriptions and cloud gaming as a separate entity. But we've already seen Microsoft combat this argument before, again, thanks to that Brazilian document. And there's not only a lot of competition here, including with PlayStation Plus, EA Play, GeForce Now, and cloud gaming. You have Luna, PlayStation Now, etc., etc. But Microsoft isn't really dominant in either of these fields to the extent that it is a major concern. Even with PlayStation Plus, they just launched their own Game Pass competitor and are now making more money because of the increased price in those services. However, this is the one I could see being the biggest issue for Xbox, in a sense that I don't think that they'll be as willing to work with regulators. Sure, they might be willing to put in writing that Call of Duty will remain on PlayStation as a platform, but I don't think that they'd be as willing to make Call of Duty available for other subscription and streaming services. So I could see Microsoft fighting against that if regulators were to bring that up. Now, as for operating systems, this is the strange one, as they do mention that Microsoft could technically keep games off of Linux and Mac, which could affect consumers' decisions to go with Windows PCs instead. But that to me seems a little off base by this point. I don't really see this being a major issue at all. And again, when I look at their focal points, I don't think that really any of these poses a major threat to Microsoft. Call of Duty still remains the big concern, it seems, and I think that if that is the big issue going forward, Microsoft will just work with regulators. As for this other stuff, I think that it'll be far too difficult for regulators to actually make a case against Microsoft. That seems to be the problem, because I mean they can't just make up their own rules, and I think that there's a lot of arguments against some of the things that some of these regulators are concerned about. That is where the next big question comes in, though. What's the timeline look like? And now that we are in a second phase of the investigation, when should we get our next update? Well, they do have 90 working days to hash all this out with Microsoft, and the deadline is now set for March of 2023. Now, keep in mind, though, that the FTC is also investigating this. They're in their second phase as well, and that one we might hear about even as early as this month. So we should start to hear some pretty major updates. So things are about ready to get very, very interesting. Of course, as always, though, stay subscribed, hit that bell and everything, because I will keep you all updated on all of the latest Activision Blizzard news, so do hit that bell. Now, we did also get an update for the Nintendo Switch, as Nintendo posted their Q3 fiscal year report. This is for July 1st through September 30th, and in this time frame, they sold an additional 3.25 million Switch units, bringing the total to 114.3 million sold worldwide. Now, that means that it's less than 3 million units away from surpassing the PlayStation 4 and just a little over 4 million away from the Game Boy. Now, once it passes those, it will have become the third best-selling console ever made, and at the rate it's selling, this is very likely going to happen by the end of this year. So this is a huge thing right now. I mean, we don't see this happen very often, but one thing that we are seeing is that the Switch is slowing down just ever so slightly. While what they're doing is still very impressive, 3.25 million units sold is still technically down 19% year over year, and because of this, Nintendo has scaled back their forecast. Previously, they were expecting 21 million units sold for the year, but they've now dropped that forecast to 19 million instead. Now, we are starting to see a little bit of a trend where they're dropping their forecast, and as we talked about last week, this could actually be a sign that the Switch generation is winding down just a little bit. Now, to be clear, what they're doing here is still insanely impressive, don't get me wrong there, and the Switch is still selling incredibly well. But I think that we are starting to get to that point that a new Switch console might be on the horizon. In order for Nintendo to keep their momentum going strong, a new console could possibly help with that, and I could see a scenario where we might start to hear about a new console as early as next year, whether that be official or unofficially. Now, as for their software, though, Nintendo, I mean, they continue to impress there as well. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is now officially the best-selling Kirby game ever made, selling 5.27 million units. So big congrats there. It definitely looks like moving to 3D paid off in a big way. Maybe they should pay attention to that. Maybe we should do something with the Donkey Kong IP as well. Just going to kind of throw that out there as well. Xenoblade 3 also, though, became the biggest debut for that franchise, already selling 1.72 million units. It's actually great to see that franchise grow the way it has. I personally believe in terms of quality, Xenoblade is one of their better IP, which is, I mean, that's saying a lot because Nintendo has a lot of really great franchises. Splatoon 3 also had a massive launch. I feel like sometimes people forget just how big this IP is, but in just 3 weeks, it sold 7.9 million units, which is, I mean, that is absolutely insane. Now, if you are interested to see some updates for some of their other games, I will drop a link in the description below. I just kind of wanted to look at some of their new big games for this year, but I mean, if you want to see some other games as well, definitely check the links in the description below. But unfortunately, we still haven't gotten an update for Metroid Dread. I really want to see them come out and confirm that game sells, but overall, another really impressive quarter for Nintendo. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, if Microsoft completes the deal, which Activision Blizzard franchise would you most like to see them revive? And as you can see here, the majority of you all would like to see StarCraft return with 34% of the votes, 28% for Spyro the Dragon, 20% for Warcraft, then 10% voted for other, and then 7% voted for Hexen. So yeah, this really leans into what Phil Spencer was just saying the other day. He did suggest that he would like to revive franchises like Warcraft and StarCraft, and considering that most of you all did vote for StarCraft, looks like a lot of you all would be very, very happy if that did turn out to be the case. This is one of the reasons, though, that I do believe that this acquisition could actually be a good thing. I do believe under the Xbox umbrella and just how Xbox Game Pass works, that they would likely encourage more variety in the Activision Blizzard portfolio. Whereas Activision currently, they primarily seem to focus more on Call of Duty and just try to pump out one big release every single year. Phil Spencer, though, I mean, he's already mentioned StarCraft, Warcraft, and a Hexen revival. Now, for me, personally, I just want to see Spyro 4. That's what I'm personally hoping for. And that did get second place here, so a lot of you all do seem to be on board for that one as well. Yes, let's get a Spyro revival in development. Going through the comments, though, Serge Leon also mentioned another good idea here, in my opinion, as they said, all of the above really miss good RTS from back in the Warcraft and StarCraft days. Toys for Bob could be the platformer studio for Microsoft if they are freed from Call of Duty, and Spyro, Crash Bandicoot, Revive Banjo would also be wonderful. If Raven Software was allowed to revive the Hexen series, they could partner with the id Software team with the latest id Tech engine, and I'd also like to see a new Soldier of Fortune from them. So yeah, I do like this idea here, and just the cross-development between Xbox, Bethesda, and Activision. There could be some good from that. As Serge pointed out, fans have been asking for a new Banjo-Kazooie for years, myself included, and Toys for Bob would be the absolute perfect studio to bring it back. We've already seen them do that with Crash Bandicoot, and I believe Spyro Reignited, I think that came from them as well, so it would be really cool to see them do that with Banjo, even if it's just a remake. They could be that studio to make it finally happen. Then you have Hexen, and that could be revived with id Software. I mean, we've already seen that with modern old-school FPS games like Doom, so yeah, there's a lot of possibilities there. And this Activision Blizzard acquisition has a lot of potential with those type of partnerships. Now, I did see some other games, though, pop up in the comments, including Prototype, you have Singularity, and even games like Guitar Hero. One thing's for sure, though, there's a lot of dormant Activision Blizzard games that it would be really nice to see them return. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.